Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Okay. Well, today we're going to talk about world peace, which is pretty timely, isn't it?
You can tackle some pretty big topics here.
Of course, world peace is never not timely.
The world's coming to an end.
It don't exist.
Peace.
We are Buddhists, and this is a Buddhist session. I can say I try to practice Buddhism, and so as Buddhists or aspiring Buddhist practitioners, our main practice is surrounding the shaping. Lama Pasang used to use this phrase, shaping our minds. I was just reading something from Lama Yeshe last night. And he did a comprehensive analysis about how everything we experience, think, say, and do, and experience as external are all phenomenon that arise within our mental continuum, our minds. And so the whole of Buddhist practice is about shaping our mind, which is why at the beginning of our classes we do these prayers. The prayers are, this goes to depend on where we're being. They are merely thoughts. They are thoughts that we are aspiring to implant into our mind to make them habitual thoughts, so that as we go about our daily lives, our minds are infused with virtuous thoughts that will then inform our actions of body, speech, and life. So we'll start by taking refuge in the three jewels: the Buddha, who is the example that we aspire to follow and to become like; the Dharma, which is the thoughts and practices and that the things that arise in our world that are like the grist for the mill, and the elements that arise in our daily lives, the Dharma of the information and actions that we take to modify ourselves; and then the Sangha, which is, thank God we have companions, both highly realized Sangha, who in ways we cannot see support us, but also our visible brothers and sisters in the Dharma, such as those of us here. So that's our main deal, is we're taking refuge. So we will say it. If you don't have this, you can just meditate on it, but we're going to say the most minimal set of prayers this morning, because Christopher has lots on his mind. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha, through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Before I repeat, if you are not aware of what the paramitas are, those are the basic bodhisattva practice. They're called the 6 perfections in English. And it's generosity, ethical behavior, patience in the sense of not getting angry, enthusiastic effort, which is don't give up, concentration, which is developing single-pointed focus, and wisdom, which is the insight into how things actually exist. So that's the paramitas that are be referenced here. We'll repeat a second time. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha, through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha, through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And so just think for a moment about what we just said. especially the part about practicing. It's basically saying here that through our practice, the positive potential we create. So that's the transformation by listening to the teachings and then through the paramitas applying the teachings. That's how we do it. And then we could skip ahead thinking about all the teachers who are out there and within us and around us and in all the realms, all the teachers of every sort that are supporting the upliftment of humanity through teaching and through their example. So thinking of all those gurus and lamas of every sort, visualize them surrounding us, and especially the ones you have a connection to in front of you. So visualize yourself surrounded by all the teachers. And then add to that all the sentient beings who you have a karmic connection with in this world. We're all here karmically connected. And think about your commitment that you just cited, that you wish to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all those sentient beings. And so with that, we come to this teaching in order to learn how to become perfect benefit to all sentient beings.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Ah. So today, last week we talked about what is the world, and I'm just going to do a brief recap of that. And may I say, I did this using study guide and AI, and I asked AI to give a brief recap of what we talked about last week, and it's pretty cool. So what I would say about AI, Chat GPT, and all that is that from my experience with it, it actually cannot think, so it is not a conscious entity, but it is an amazing and a very useful tool depending on how you use it and what prompts you give it, what information you give it. So here's a review of the last session, session 48, brief from last Sunday. In our last session, we asked the question, what is the world, and explored the meaning of the world from both an everyday conventional view and a Mahayanist perspective. So in the ordinary conventional view, the world seems like a solid, objective reality that's out there, places, people, and things that exist independently of us and independently of one another. From the Mahayana Buddhist view, what we call the world is not an inherently fixed thing, or is it self-existent. It is an appearance of consciousness shaped by our mental imprints, perceptions, and ignorance. Our mental imprints, perceptions, and ignorance. Each one of us has our own unique, I would say, set of mental imprints based on our experience, our history, our habits, our propensities. And so we look out at the world through those mental habits and propensities, and we project onto the world our feelings about it. And this is the world that appears to us. We studied Maitreya's verse from discriminating between the middle and the extremes, which explains the appearances of the environment, beings, and even our sense of self arise from consciousness, arise from awareness, and they do not exist as they appear. They do not exist in the way they appear to us. Lama Yeshe's Kopan teachings from 1976 illustrated this with practical examples. Memories, habits, and repeated delusions layer on top of our perception. And delusions are simply a belief that is not grounded or based in actual verifiable logic. and rational analysis. That's what a delusion is. It's something that we believe in, but actually there is no proof or logical reason for it to be the way we believe it to be. And that's basically our view of the world is very much like that because of our mistaken perception that things exist separately and independently of one another. True understanding, our memories, habits, and repeated delusions layer on top of our perception, making the world seem more solid than it actually is. True understanding requires more than intellectual knowledge. It requires contemplation and direct experience. So that's sort of a summary of what Lama Yeshe had said. Then finally, we looked at Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, stanzas 75 through 77, which connect this understanding to the view of emptiness, that nothing exists independently from its own side. Everything co-arises dependently and interdependently. So the points there were emptiness is profound, beyond the extremes of permanence or nihilism. So it's beyond the extremes of saying things exist exactly the way they appear, and they will, and this does not change. And nihilism says, nothing matters, I don't care, nothing exists, nothing exists. It's just all a big, big, big illusion. And nihilism is very dangerous because what it falls into is a state of deep depression and turning in on oneself and just giving up. Fear of emptiness arises because our ego clings to a truly existing I, a truly existing me, that somehow is a permanent thing. And denying emptiness or dependent arising blocks our liberation from suffering and enlightenment, and it harms both ourselves and others. The world doesn't exist as a fixed, independent thing. It exists through dependent arising as convention, how we label it, and designation. Recognizing this loosens the rigid thinking we have and helps us see both the world and ourselves with more clarity, humility, and compassion. So now, what I always had intended to do is to move from what is the world to then what is world peace. If the world actually has no inherent self-independent existence that's out there, then what does that say? What does that mean when we're talking about world peace? So I thought I would start with some quotes from excerpts from an essay that was written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And it's entitled A Human Approach to World Peace. I don't know exactly when he wrote this essay because I couldn't find a date on it, but I imagine it was probably somewhere around 2010, 12, 11, something like that. But when you listen to this, he might as well have said it yesterday. When we rise in the morning and listen to the radio or read the newspaper, we are confronted with the same sad news: violence, crime, wars, and disasters. I cannot recall a single day without a report of something terrible happening somewhere. Even in these modern times, it is clear that one's precious life is not safe. No former generation has had to experience so much bad news as we face today. This constant awareness of fear and tension should make any sensitive and compassionate person question seriously the progress of our modern world. We can only conclude that there must be something seriously wrong with our progress and development. And if we do not check it in time, there could be disastrous consequences for the future of humanity. No one can deny the unprecedented material benefit of science and technology. But our basic human problems remain. We are still faced with the same, if not more, suffering, fear, and tension. Thus, it is only logical to try to strike a balance between material developments on the one hand and the development of spiritual human values on the other. In order to bring about this great adjustment, we need to revive our humanitarian values. Humanitarian values. We can't create peace on paper. I speak simply as a human being, as an upholder of the humanitarian values that are the bedrock not only of Mahayana Buddhism, but of all the great world religions. Under present conditions, there is definitely a growing need for human understanding and a sense of universal responsibility. We cannot create peace on paper. Attempts have been made in the past to create societies more just and equal. Institutions have been established with noble charters to combat antisocial forces. Unfortunately, such ideas have been cheated by selfishness. Compassion and tolerance is the test of our moral strength. More than ever before, we witness today how ethics and noble principles are obscured by the shadow of self-interest, particularly in the political sphere. Politics, devoid of ethics, does not further human welfare. And life without morality reduces humans to the level of beasts. Living in society, we should share the sufferings of our fellow citizens and practice compassion and tolerance, not only towards our loved ones, but also towards our enemies. This is the test of our moral strength. The need for self-examination and self-correction. The ultimate purpose of all religions is to serve and benefit humanity. This is why it is so important that religion always be used to affect the happiness and peace of all beings and not merely to convert others. But the embracing of a particular religion does not mean the rejection of another religion or one's own community. In this regard, there are two things important to keep in mind: self-examination and self-correction. We should constantly check our attitude towards others, examining ourselves carefully, and we should correct ourselves immediately when we find we are wrong. Happiness springs from inner development. Finally, a few words about material progress. Although materialistic knowledge in the form of science and technology has contributed enormously to human welfare, it is not capable of creating lasting happiness. This is because materialistic knowledge can only provide a type of happiness that is dependent upon physical conditions. It cannot provide happiness that springs from inner development. For renewal of human values and attainment of lasting happiness, we need to look to the common humanitarian heritage of all nations the world over. May this essay serve as an urgent reminder lest we forget the human values that unite us all as a single family on this planet. And I think that's so appropriate for right now. I mean, he's speaking directly to what what the state of the world is right now, how we're experiencing it. So now we're going to, yeah, go ahead.
There were two things that really jumped out at me that he said that there are two things we have to do in this context. And it was self-examination and
Correction.
self-correction. That was all he said to do. I mean, not all, but that really jumped out at me.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we actually have to look at our own minds, our own habitual propensities, and how does that relate to how we are viewing our world, the way we see others, the way we see events and things in the world. Any other discussions about his essay? Because it's quite meaningful, and it's pointing directly to what we're experiencing.
Yeah, and that's in the guide that you'll be sending out.
Yeah, it's in the study guide. Yeah, and I condensed this essay quite a bit. It was very, very long, so I didn't want to. I can put a link to the whole thing online.
I mean, I think it's just takes a lot of guts to keep looking at yourself.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like the problem, like, they always say when your airplane is crashing to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. It's a little bit like that.
A little bit like that.
I mean,
but if the airplane is actually crashing,
yeah.
Forget about the oxygen mask.
I don't know,
If there's turbulence on the plane, put your oxygen mask on first, and then help others to do that. Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, there's another thing I was just sort of thinking about, maybe a better metaphor. This one just jumped into my mind about if you've ever been on a boat that was too small for the conditions of the ocean upon which you sailed, or even for that matter, a canoe on a lake, but there's this feeling that we have so many instances where just you have to watch yourself and manage your own behavior.
Mhm.
I mean, you can't. I mean, it's a very interesting. And when you can do that, then you can sort of enjoy the situation.
Going back to the point of self-correction, this comes right to one of the paramitas that you mentioned, and we normally call that paramita enthusiastic effort, but in Shantideva, he calls it courageous effort. It's courageous effort, and why it's courageous is that we're actually looking at ourselves, and we're generating enthusiastic effort to go against the habitual delusional propensities and habits that we have. It takes courage to do that. It takes courage to look at our mind, our habits, our propensities, and to say, you know what, I may be wrong, and I may need to change somehow. That's courageous effort. And that's one of the perfections. We need to perfect that in ourselves. Any other discussion about what His Holiness said? Anything?
Just something that you what you're saying right now. I'm segueing into 12 steps and people with addiction, and I'm not familiar with that whole process, but I have family members, so I'm involved and I get pieces of it. So I don't even know in what order the steps come, but one of the things that was a yogi presented one time that recovery, in addiction, because what we're speaking about is addiction. It's habits and addictions and how we view the world. And wrong view, but they say recovery is recovering your true self. And one of the things is it requires a self-examination. You can't heal something unless you're aware of it. And you can go a long ways, but if you're unaware of what you're doing, you can't. And so it's just hugely important. And I'm just seeing it as it relates to addiction, not just in alcohol or drug or whatever, but just in the addiction of what we all create, and how difficult it is to go, oh, I might be wrong. We can change our mind in a lot of areas, but in some areas we just don't have a clue that we might be mistaken, and how difficult it is to let go of that kind of hold on what we think is reality is big.
Yeah, you're right. It's huge, really. It's huge.
Big.
But it's something that we must do. If we actually care about peace, if we care about happiness, it's something we must do. And you're totally right about it being like an addiction. I mean, Rabina says this all the time, where we are addicts. This is the problem of ego self-grasping, independent me and mine and I. We're addicted to it. We've been doing this for so long. I mean, Buddhism says since beginningless time, Buddhism says the world that appears to us has arisen because of ego self-grasping and an addiction to that. So that's really what we're looking at here. We're looking at our own delusional view of how things actually exist.
My own paraphrasing of the first step in the 12-step program would be, you have to admit you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, or that you're addicted. So it's until you admit that you are wrong, you can't take any kind of corrective action. So in a sense, that's what His Holiness is saying. You have to watch yourself and then admit that correction was called for.
And that's the courageous part,
And I mean, call the goosebumps. That's a really huge thing, to admit that you have to do something different. That you've been admitting that you're wrong.
It goes-
You're doing the wrong thing. You're doing something stupid. Or, I know lots of addicts. I've known many addicts in my life. And it takes a long time to finally go, wow, yeah, this is an addiction.
Mhm.
There's all kinds of games we can play around our addictions, justifying them and excusing them and calling them something else and giving them other framework. But when we boil it down to just what it is.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other comments on that?
And Chris, maybe the self-compassion in my mind, I think everything does go back into the roots of bodhicitta, right? The love and compassion that everyone has in themselves. I think, the root has to be there somewhere where, like Kovita said, if you have a sense of self-compassion, maybe that empowers you to analyze, see the situation where you are, and then maybe take right actions. Because I think the problem is people are not aware of their very own situation. So lack of bodhicitta awareness, lack of everything that is so vague is causing the confusion. And I think if everybody understands the self-compassion, love, and just too many factors outside is what causing disturbance. So I think everybody should start with love and compassion. That starts with self-compassion, and analyze the situation, and maybe that leads to some kind of indications to move forward. Otherwise, it's such a hard topic to teach or help anyone. Uh, that's what I think.
Yeah. I no, I agree with you, Ajay. I think what we need to do here is define our terms. Define what compassion is and define what love is. So from a Buddhist standpoint, love is simply the wish, may you be happy. Compassion is the wish, may you not suffer, combined with what can I do about it? How can I help? May you not suffer, and what can I do about it? So when we're talking about self-love and self-compassion, we're saying to ourselves, may I be happy? And when we're talking about self-compassion, we're recognizing I'm suffering, and what can I do about it? What can I do about my suffering so that I can be happy? And so it's an excellent point, Ajay. It's exactly what Buddhism is telling us to do. You're way ahead of us, and yeah, you're right. But it's very important, very important. Rabina stresses this all the time that we need to define clearly what our terms are when we're talking about things like love and compassion, because we can get very confused about it. So let's
Yeah, and in our popular culture, to state the obvious, people would hear self-compassion and think, oh, I guess that means I should book myself a day at a spa and have my,
yeah, go ahead.
When it comes to having compassion even for yourself is one thing, but when you realize all people want is to be happy, how do you help someone that you don't know, but or a friend that basically doesn't agree with anything that you have to say, and you want to help them, but that is not possible? How, other than saying prayers and mantras and keeping them in your thoughts, or is that enough from a Buddhist standpoint? Because it's okay to say, okay, I'm going to be compassionate for me, but how do you be compassionate to someone that's controversial and difficult, and just turning on the television, and you see someone that you realize, they really just want to be happy. So now what can I do for them?
If they're actually not looking to be helped, there's not much that can be done.
Yeah.
What happens is when someone is suffering enough, they go, something's wrong, help me. And then they could be open to some new kind of idea.
That
Yeah.
or okay.
That's
right. What I was just
otherwise
thinking,
I think all we can do is to be nice, kind to them, love them, but do not, don't argue or trigger or fight with them.
Yeah.
If that's not what they're looking for, it's just going to increase the tension and the anger.
So then the best thing would be to do is to, again, not start anything, just be kind and try to find a way to have a conversation, but not go there.
Yeah, and unless they actually are saying, you know what, I'm really suffering here.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. Do you have any
Yeah.
anything you could say that would help?
Because that happens like with neighbors and people that you encounter on a daily basis. You think, gosh, what can I do for them? But at the same time,
be kind to them.
That's the only thing that you can do, which might, oh, you look good today, or
exactly.
Yeah.
And accept them. Accept them for who they are.
And that's not being complacent. That's just, there's nothing more that you can do other than that.
I think we underestimate how much that does.
Absolutely.
What did Buddha do other than demonstrate and say you can become? I think in a way,
and if you do that enough,
I'd add to the answer. I'd add to the answer. Just be happy.
Yeah.
Sincerely dig into the depths of our heart.
Well, the reason I asked that is
just radiate it and don't feel like you need to say anything necessarily.
Yeah. Well, the reason I said that is sometimes people will say, "Well, that's nice," but that.
Well, what if that is all we can do?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Is that that's a good strategy as opposed to
Have you ever been, I mean, I know we've all had this experience, and I think we have to remind ourselves that we have good examples of how this works. Of walking into a room where the mood is very nice, and there's one or two people who are just, in a good place, and it raises the whole level of the room. Similarly, you can have it happen where the room has a nice dynamic, and then somebody who's kind of cranky, walks in, and the whole room descends a bit.
yeah.
I think in a way, we just don't.
Never
We
underestimate
don't realize how
power.
big a deal that actually is.
Yeah.
What if you just walked around the world and all you did everywhere you go was uplift?
Yes.
Isn't
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And I think we do forget that.
I think so.
I know I myself, if I get frustrated with people that are just telling me, here we go again.
Think of it like a note in a chord. You just always want to be the thing that's harmonizing.
Yeah.
And no one has to even notice it. It's not like you need to walk in a room and be the one that everyone goes, "Oh wow, I feel so much better."
You're too attached to your need to help somebody.
Well, exactly.
That's
Well,
Okay. So we
Sometimes it's supposed to do nothing.
Merritt brought up the 12-step program. Well, Buddhism has something similar to that, but it's 8 steps, and it's mind training. So what we're going to talk about now is world peace through thought transformation, and it starts with ourselves. So what we're going to discuss here is the 8 verses of mind training. Like I said, this would be Buddhism's version of 12 steps. It was composed by the Kadampa Geshe Langri Tangpa. It's a foundational text in Tibetan Buddhism that focuses on transforming one's mind and attitude. The text is part of what is called the Lojong, or mind training tradition, which emphasizes compassion and altruism. The basic text is over 800 years old. The primary aim of these verses is to cultivate a compassionate mindset and reduce self-centeredness. Practitioners are encouraged to reflect on these teachings regularly, integrating them into daily life to foster a more altruistic and peaceful existence. Regarding that, Kavita and I, this is one of the first things that Geshe Dragpa taught us. Way back when we began studying Buddhism, was the 8 verses of mind training, and he told us to memorize these, and he told us to contemplate them, and we did. We basically followed his advice because we had confidence in him. So these 8 verses of mind training.
At the TV, they're actually seeing you from the point of view of the camera.
Oh,
Well, I know you want to see their faces. Do you want me to? So if you
well, no, it's fine. It's fine. It
if you
doesn't
want me
really
to
matter.
Looking at people.
When I'm looking like this, guys, in Zoom land, I'm looking right at you. But I don't think there's a need to turn that around. I
Okay.
would like that, Don can see them and Brian can see
Okay.
them. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the entire scope of mind training is the entire scope of mind training to transform negative attitudes into positive ones is summarized in these 8 verses. The first 7 verses focus on methods of compassion, recognizing suffering, how can I help? And the 8th emphasizes wisdom being the actual nature of reality, of existence. This guides practitioners towards enlightenment. So here's the first verse. By thinking of all sentient beings as even better than a wish-granting gem for accomplishing the highest aims, may I always consider them precious. By thinking of all sentient beings as even better than a wish-granting gem for accomplishing the highest aims, may I always consider them precious. Everyone wants happiness and freedom from suffering. Focusing only on ourselves isolates us, but caring for others opens the door to real joy, respect, and peace. Training the mind takes effort, yet even small acts of kindness and patience strengthen compassion within us. We don't need to be perfect to begin. Living with genuine concern for others is itself the path to a meaningful life. Living with genuine concern for others is itself the path to a meaningful life. Here's the second verse. Wherever I go, with whomever I go, may I see myself as less than all others, and from the depth of my heart, may I consider them supremely precious. I'll say that again. Wherever I go, with whomever I go, may I see myself as less than all others, and from the depth of my heart, may I consider them supremely precious. Pride separates us from others, even when we're trying to help them. Real strength is found in humility, seeing ourselves honestly without a sense of superiority. That's the ego. By recognizing both our own flaws and the innate potential all beings have for positive transformation, we learn to serve others with respect rather than ego. One of the ways, this particular verse always, when you hear it, rubs the ego the wrong way. Wherever I go, with whomever I go, may I see myself as less than all others, right? But wait a minute. But if you actually look at the numbers of sentient beings, of beings who exist, and then you look at you, well, there are far more of others than there are of you. So in that sense, you are less than all others. It's only when we join do we become greater, have a greater being with others. When we see ourselves as separate, we actually are less than all others. But that takes a lot. It takes a lot of contemplation. This is why these verses are so transformational. They're not like sugar-coated to make us feel good. They're to transform our mind and train us to think in a way that is actually non-delusional. Any comments or questions about that particular verse?
I do kind of I don't know, a question or just where it trips me up is that I understand where the intention is to transform the mind, but the languaging of it is, it seems like it's cultivating separation. Because when you're considering yourself as less than every other being, it's like it feels like you're being separate. You're separating yourself from the whole. And I think it's probably a matter of semantics because I know what the intention is, but it feels like it's addressing the ego, but in a way it feels like it's cultivating the ego by having yourself be separate than every other being.
Right. I think what we have to look at is how the ego defines myself. And the ego defines myself as the most important thing, independent of everything else. And what can I get for myself? This is how the ego works. And when the ego isn't getting what the ego wants, when that self isn't getting what it wants, it becomes very devious, very manipulative. And we see this all the time, especially, as His Holiness said, in politics. Very, very devious, very, very manipulative, and extremely obscure and confusing. So when we say, may I see myself as less than all others, we're talking about this ego. We're talking about this ego, this deluded view of myself, because we think we're the center of everything. The ego does. The ego thinks it's the center of everything. And all of the problems in the world arise because of this view of myself.
To add to that, Merit, I really wondered about this for quite a few years, this line. And I finally came to think about it in a way that will, I think, make sense, which is, so the way that goes, wherever I go, with whomever I go, may I see myself as less than all others. And, a lot.
From the depths of my
So
heart.
what I realized at a certain point was, at one level, it could be very simplistic. Wherever I go, I enter the room, say, for example, and I'm just one person entering a room. And so on just a mere numbers game, when I enter that room, the happiness of the others is more important than mine. I'm just one person. So that's one of the inroads that I've made with this particular line over the years, is to just think of, and it's very much related to everything Christopher just said. It's just a very simplified way of how I've been able to convince myself of the veracity of that particular line, because I initially approached it as a good guilty Catholic, which was, I'm a sinner, I'm bad, I'm less than everybody else. But actually, obviously, looking at the full expanse of Buddhism, there must be getting at something else.
Yeah.
And there's other translations, and
It's not coming from a
I've
Catholic.
pasted 2 translations in the chat. And I think, Christopher Geshe Sopa used to lead us through one that he did that had lots of language about training.
Yeah, right. So we can include those, but these are important that we don't just read them once and go, our initial reaction will be, well, I agree with that. I disagree with that. I don't like that. It's very important that we go a lot further than that and really contemplate these, particularly understanding that Buddhism has nothing to do with guilt. It has everything to do with interconnection, interdependence, love, and compassion and wisdom. So this is where these verses are coming from. We should understand that and not project our own. Well, Kavita said her particular religious upbringing makes her view that verse in a particular way, but many of us view it in the same way, no matter how we were raised, because because actually what you can say is the world religion, if you want to put it that way, is egoism. That's our religion. We all understand it. We all engage in it. So, and it is what is preventing world peace from happening. All right. So let's move on. Here's the third verse. May I examine my mind in all actions, and as soon as a negative state occurs, since it endangers myself and others, may I firmly face and avert it. May I examine my mind in all actions, and as soon as a negative state occurs, since it endangers myself and others, may I firmly face and avert it. Self-centeredness fuels disturbing emotions. disturbing emotions arise and are flamed by self-centeredness. But each disturbing emotion has an antidote that we can practice. For instance, attachment weakens when we see beyond surface beauty or the surface thing that is attracting us. Attachment weakens when we see beyond the surface. Anger softens when it is met with love. This sort of goes to Dawn's, question about when you're with friends who are, angry and complaining and very divisive. Well, that anger softens when it's met with love. Just love and acceptance for being a person. The naivety of ignorance clears when we reflect on dependent arising. Everything arises in dependence on other things. Everything, meaning then, everything, including us, is interconnected, interdependent. And this is how we actually exist, not as a self-existing ego that is separate from everything else. So the naivety of ignorance clears when we reflect on dependent arising. Real love and compassion come not from attraction, but from recognizing every being's right to be happy. So we're not including just humans. This is huge. Every being's right to happiness. By training in these ways, our relationships and our inner life becomes more stable and more free. So I'll read that one again. May I examine my mind in all actions, and as soon as a negative state occurs, since it endangers myself and others, may I firmly face and avert it. So this verse is sort of guiding us on how to face and avert these disturbing emotions that come up in us.
It just is disrupting the behavior chain.
Mhm.
Think of cognitive behavior.
Right. This is mind training. All our behavior comes from our mind. So we're training our mind in
So
it's the 12 steps of Buddhism.
Of course, the analysis, and then you need to find the strategies or whatever.
Mhm.
When firmly facing and averting it, doesn't mean you go. It might mean.
No, there's an
It
antidote.
might mean you go for a walk.
You apply an antidote.
It might mean you say some mantras, or it might mean you call your stepmother. I don't know. Could mean anything.
Mhm.
The
Whatever
averting-
will. Yeah.
Yeah. The averting is a discovery.
Mhm. Okay, here's the fourth one. When I see beings of a negative disposition, or those oppressed by negativity or pain, may I, as if finding a treasure, consider them precious, for they are rarely met. When I see beings of a negative disposition, or those oppressed by negativity or pain, may I, as if finding a treasure, consider them precious, for they are rarely met.
Meaning the treasures are rarely met.
The treasure is really rarely met.
Yeah.
Right. Right. The ego immediately goes, what do you mean rarely met? We meet them all the time. But we don't see them as a treasure. When we meet someone difficult or unkind, instead of withdrawing love, we can treat them as a rare opportunity to deepen our compassion, like discovering a hidden treasure. A hidden treasure. Because it's the key that's actually going to unlock our love and our compassion. That's the hidden treasure. These are very, very profound, and they need to be contemplated, these verses. So any thoughts about that one? or discussion about that one?
I think the challenge is always, whether you want to call it love, support, kindness, whatever, compassion, is how it should be delivered to that individual. Because as we've talked about before with the monks, sometimes they, are very understanding of their students. Sometimes they hit their students. Sometimes they, put out the right, what they consider the appropriate kind of response to help the students in whatever path they're on. So I think when you think about these steps, you have to think about, well, you can love somebody, but still you can say, your behavior is unacceptable. And, I'm not going to endorse or tolerate that behavior, even though I can still have compassion for you as an individual and as a sentient being. So the challenge is knowing what kind of response to have under what kind of circumstance.
And so I guess, that you could say almost that the treasure there is that finding that way that you're actually going to be able to help them. That's it. They trigger, what we're doing is we're using somebody who is they're very depressed, very difficult to even reach. How do we do that? How do we help them? It causes us to really analyze our action and relationship with them and what we can do that's going to help them in a way that they need to be helped.
Well, I don't know that, Mr. Buddha, I'm not sure that anyone has the insight always to know exactly the right way to help them.
Right, but we can develop our wisdom. That's the last step.
I gotta say that I think that the treasure is being forced to contemplate the nature of what you're seeing out there. So I consider them like a treasure that's rarely met, because it's it's forcing you to look at, to try to plumb the depths of the reality of whatever you're seeing.
Right, and that if what we're seeing is something that we are interconnected with, then of course we want to help.
I want to just point out this particular one is actually, the guidance here is about thinking. It's not, there's no guidance here about doing anything.
Right.
It's not
Just
telling you.
see them. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's your attitude towards what you're seeing.
Right.
Not directed to go do something to fix it.
Right. Okay. But to not withdraw our love, to not withdraw our love. Okay. 5. This is a hard one. Whenever others, due to their jealousy, revile and treat me in unjust ways, may I accept this defeat myself and offer the victory to others. Whenever others, due to their jealousy, revile and treat me in unjust ways, may I accept this defeat myself and offer the victory to others. This goes against everything the ego stands for. When we're insulted or criticized, we should respond with humility and tolerance while maintaining confidence without pride. Let me read that again. When we're insulted or criticized, we should respond with humility and tolerance while maintaining confidence without pride. True strength is quiet courage, not boastfulness. In conflicts, we must discern whether accepting loss benefits others or whether protecting their welfare requires strong action. What matters is motivation. If actions, even forceful ones, are guided by compassion and concern for others, they are correct. As Shantideva teaches, we must always act with the greater benefit of others in mind, carefully examining each situation and our intention. So this sort of goes to what you were saying, Brian, about some of the teachers can be quite forceful, but the reason they are that way is they understand that they've seen something in you. I know this happened to me. Teacher saw something in me, and I was coming from a place where I was totally vulnerable and expressing uh, something that had occurred to me and relating it to something the teacher was talking about. And the teacher just slammed me. It's just, what do you mean? What do you mean? And this just jarred me. But I trusted the teacher. And so after 2 months of thinking every day and grumbling to myself and going for walks and spewing and thinking this over, I recognized that the teacher was absolutely right. I was projecting onto something the teacher was saying, my own stuff, and not actually seeing what was being said to me. So this is extremely important.
This is also similar to, a couple of the practices of Bodhisattva or cheated, where, when somebody insults you or somebody steals from you or something, you're supposed to give them whatever you have. And then you're supposed to, if they speak ill of you, you're supposed to bow before them and honor them. It's the same kind of situation.
Well, look what happens when we don't do that. The world, wars, killing, escalation of tension and violence. This is, we have a choice. Are we going to escalate the tension, get in somebody's face, get into fisticuffs, or are we just going to go, okay, thank you, sorry, or take some other kind of action that is of benefit, not of harm?
I'm thinking of Venerable Robina's thing she always says, which is when you're with others, keep your lip zipped and your hands to yourself, which is good advice. It's not necessarily your job to always have some things to say.
Yeah. Sometimes a person just needs to express and vent, and we just sort of listen.
And the advice here is just take it on board and chew on it.
But in my own case, when this particular teacher slammed me hard, my very first thought was, this must be something. This teacher is showing my mind to me somehow. I need to look at this because I trusted this teacher. That's the thing. When you trust somebody and they are very firm with you, you take it seriously.
You have to be willing to look at yourself. And sometimes it's so confusing because you think, okay, should I get sucked into this? Or I thought I had the right idea,
I think we just need to be open to transformation, positive transformation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Any more about this particular one, which is a tough one, but the next one's even tougher. This was the toughest one for me, the next one. 6, when someone whom I have helped or in whom I have placed great hope harms me with great injustice, may I see that one as a sacred friend. 6, when someone whom I have helped or in whom I have placed great hope harms me with great injustice, may I see that one as a sacred friend. Again, this flies in the face of the ego religion. Flies in the face of it. When someone who we have helped thanklessly refuses to acknowledge us, or when a person who we have placed great hope and trust in harms us in a very unfair and undeserved way, or seemingly unfair and undeserved way, we should not become angry. We should instead practice patience, viewing them as teachers who help us strengthen this quality in ourselves, meaning strengthen our own patience. We should practice patience, viewing them as teachers who help us strengthen this quality in ourselves. And patience can be cultivated by reflecting on karma. This is huge. This is extremely important. Patience can be cultivated by reflecting on karma. What goes around comes around. Our present suffering is the result of our own past actions. And being angry only creates more causes for future suffering. So when somebody it seemingly harms you in a way that feels so unjust, so undeserved, and this is what helped me the most in this situation, is to realize this is my karma coming back to me. I must have done something like this to somebody else. Otherwise, it would not be happening to me in this way. I wouldn't even experience it. And so I saw this as sort of a great teaching. But it took a long time, but I saw it as a great teaching on what patience actually means. And recognizing that we are, so everything that appears to us, including the world the way it is now, the way it appears to us, it's our karmic appearance. It's our karmic appearance. Each one of us has a different, slightly different view. So we need to look at that and say, what can I learn from this? How can I change this appearance? How can I behave in a way that's going to change this appearance and not continue? If it's a bad one, if it's one that seems wrong, unjust, how do we change it? And we reflect on karma and then going forward, I'm going to behave in a different way. I will not do this to anyone, including who I see as my enemy. I won't even think of them as my enemy. I mean, it's huge beyond expression, really. Anyway, any other thoughts about this one?
Well, as usual, I have that.
I'm sure.
Just to share that I've used this a lot. Many of us have had situations growing up as kids with our parents whom we placed great hope and had great expectations that they would be the ideal perfect parents and do everything exactly right. And so I have applied this a lot with regard to, you know, things that objectively I can say as an adult, like, wow, that wasn't a very good thing to do as a parent. It was either neglect or abuse or, you know. So I just put that out there. That's a very fertile field for many of us to apply this particular one.
And what you take from that in terms of your own behavior is?
Well, I mean, the first layer has always been the analysis on this is a result of two things. Number one, yes, I see it as a karmic reckoning for myself. You know, they use the term in our lineage, action similar to the cause. So things that happen to us, one of the results of our actions is that we will see later on actions similar to the one we've done. That's one level, like you say. The other level is for more insight into the fact that these individual human beings are just flawed human beings like everyone and me. And, you know, why should I have an expectation that they are without flaw? That there's some ideal behavior of an ideal parent that somehow I should hold them to and expect that they do.
But you're not viewing that through a Buddhist perspective when you're growing up as a kid.
No.
Of course not, no.
No, you have your own perception about what a good parent should be. You want your parents to be that good parent. And sometimes that's not the right way for a parent to be in order for you to turn out to be a good person or a good adult. So, you know, it goes back to this thing we were talking about before, is, you know, you have to make choices about what you do and help someone mature and grow and become a good person at the end of the day, but that process may entail things that you as a child say, that's not what I would see as a perfect parent. I would see that let me have all my candy, let me have all the money,
Right.
and
Well, I'm talking about from the point of view of the child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
You know.
that's what I'm saying. It's your
Yeah.
perception of what you think a good.
I think, some of us who had, I'm not gonna go into the details, but there are certain things that are just in our social structure, for example, if you are abandoned on the roadside by your parent with nowhere to go, we would all say, yeah, that was not good parental behavior. That's different than my mom wouldn't buy me a skateboard. So there's levels, but I'm talking about in general, I think we can use it with our parents if you have parent issues.
So I think about ego versus equanimity. So,
Mhm.
I think about, if you try to be, you try to, what is it,
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. They're just people. The equanimity, that was my way of articulating, I think, what you're going.
so if you just live in a place of equanimity, you would be probably in a much better off place than if you, and I think if you, to be equanimous, you have to decrease your ego. They're inversely related.
Just to clarify, what is your definition of equanimity?
Well, I mean, I suppose you don't get, uh, too distressed about something that's negative that happens, and at the same time, you appreciate when the positive things happen. So I guess it goes back to the six perfections, joy about virtuous activity, but, ignore suffering, patience, ignore suffering and harm from others. I mean, it's kind of the same thing, but I
So
think.
it's kind of maintaining a balanced
Yeah, but I
mind.
think if you can live in equanimity, then when somebody does something, it doesn't necessarily impact you so negatively, and you can maybe deal with it better. You can see it in a different way. You can respond to it more productively. That kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's very important to develop that kind of equanimity. It really is. Otherwise, we're just tossed around like a leaf blowing in the wind by everything different people say or do.
And it helps you look at your past. If you've had a troubled childhood, whatever environmental issues, you can look at that and say, okay, well that's okay. That's good. I'm able to see it differently.
Right.
I'm able to, put things in perspective and not let it, ruin the rest of my day.
Well, and particularly if you can use those events and say from your childhood to strengthen who you are
Exactly. Yeah.
and make you a better person, actually.
Yeah. Well, exactly. That's exactly what that's about. And being grateful that you actually have that opportunity, because if you hadn't had those experiences,
Right.
you wouldn't have had, the cause to do something about it.
Right.
You wouldn't know the difference.
It brings in, this discussion of all this wise insight we're trying to have. Brings in the importance of finding the information to give you this wise view of things. In other words, it really points out the importance of coming into exposing yourself to some dharma that will help you.
Well,
in other words, it shows you how important dharma is of whatever sort you go for.
Whatever has troubled you in the future or the past, to always remember, oh, okay, now I can look at the whys and how it happened and what is the antidote to that. It's the Four Noble Truths. There's suffering and there's causes and there's a remedy.
Right.
There. And part of it is things that you can't fix, but you can sure change your mind about them.
Right.
In the circumstance.
So the nut of this one in a way is these people that we think have harmed us are just they're just people trying to figure it out themselves. We just happen to be in a way, in some way. We just have to be there.
Or we're interconnected and interdependently bonded.
I just put it that way.
Yeah.
By the time you learn how to be a good parent, Your kids are grown and gone.
I know.
Isn't that the way
it works out?
I mean, I'm a much better grandparent than I think I was a parent. I have much more patience and I have that lived experience of, being able to look back, how would I change things that I can actually transform now in my relation to my grandchildren.
Well, in a way, your children showed you how to be a good grandparent, right?
Right.
It was so, really what matters is in the end, where do we all arrive with this? If we can transform, if we can transform our mind, if we can transform our speech, if we can transform our actions so that they are beneficial, then anything that has made that occur has been for a good reason, including any suffering we may have had that brought us to a place where we began to ask the questions, there must be something better, let me find it, help, right?
Or suffering we may have caused.
Or suffering we may have caused. Absolutely. Oh,
Exactly.
that's one thing the ego does not want to look at, is the suffering that we ourselves have caused others.
Yeah, you can see this particular verse is really loaded towards, like a parent whom I've helped. So parents helping, all the people that we feel like somehow we've helped, and how dare they do this to me. And then also we do it with our bosses at work. We somehow expect, you place great expectations on them, you great hope that they're going to treat you fairly and give you the promotion and give you meaningful work to do, or politicians that are going to lead your city, your town, or country in the way you know. So we have all these layers of how this particular verse is really active for us all the time.
Related to this verse, we can also remind ourselves that the body and mind, which wander through the samsaric world of self-centered desire and ignorance, are natural bases for suffering. So it shouldn't surprise us that we are suffering. Because we are, this samsaric world that we're in of desire and ignorance arises because of self-grasping ego. So it should not surprise us that suffering is a result, because it's going against the reality of interdependence, interconnection, and ultimately the non-dualism between self and other.
All right, let's give us one of our interview.
Okay. Shanti Deva's advice on this is simple. If suffering can be remedied, there's no need for anger. If suffering can't be remedied, anger is useless. That's pretty wise. We can kick and scream all we want, but if it's not going to change anything, then it's useless. We should find another way to be and another way to think. Finally, we should remember the harm of impatience and the value of patience. Anger clouds our judgment and damages our human wisdom, while patience allows us to face difficulties with courage, clarity, and resilience. So now we'll go to 7. Hopefully we'll get through all 8 and even get to, what is peace? What is world peace? 7. In short, may I offer both directly and indirectly all joy and benefit to all beings, my mothers, and may I myself secretly take on all of their hurt and suffering. Read it again. In short, may I offer both directly and indirectly all joy and benefit to all beings, my mothers, and may I myself secretly take on all of their hurt and suffering. This verse is talking about something that we have already studied with Geshe Nima. It's referring to Tonglen, the practice of taking on the sufferings of others and giving away all our happiness, motivated by deep compassion and love. Just as we want happiness and freedom from suffering, so does every being, including the ants and the wasps and the rattlesnakes. Recognizing that others are overwhelmed by suffering and lack the happiness that they seek, we generate the wish to take their pain and negative karma onto ourselves and to offer them our own joy, body, wealth, and merit. Although it is, and that sounds crazy, any ego who reads that or hears that says that is crazy, okay? So, although it is rare to literally exchange suffering and happiness, this meditation builds immense courage and weakens self-cherishing. Geshe Chekawa taught training in giving and taking with the breath, and both Langri Tangpa and Shanti Deva stressed that this exchange of self and others is a profound hidden practice suited for advanced practitioners. In other words, you're keeping it hidden from others. That you're not telling others that you're doing this. When Shantideva speaks of paining oneself or hurting oneself for others, he does not mean harming the body, but forcefully confronting the self-centered mind, confronting our ego. We must distinguish between the me that's obsessed with self-interest and the me that seeks enlightenment for all. True compassion develops the courage to accept even the worst sufferings, such as rebirth in the hell realms, if it truly benefits others. The point is willingness, not literal rebirth. Geshe Chekawa himself prayed to be reborn in hell for others, but at death saw a vision of a pure land, showing that his pure motivation brought positive results. There's also a story from the Buddha's life before he had been enlightened in a previous lifetime, where he actually saw that one person was going to harm many, many other people. And he was out on a boat in the middle of the ocean. And so the only thing he could do, he felt that he could do to stop this terrible thing from happening, was to take the life of the person that was going to harm everybody else. And at the same time, the Buddha said, I'm perfectly willing to go to a hell realm because I've taken another's life, but I'm doing this to, keep the others from being harmed. So what happened was the Buddha went to a hell realm and began to just, help everybody who was there. Only had compassion for them, and quickly, of course, went into higher realms of existence. But, it's important to think what we're doing psychologically in this practice with our egos. And so, like I said, Geshe Nima taught this, and I'm putting a link right to the actual teaching and the practice with all the instructions that he gave for Tonglen that will be in this study guide. So this stanza illustrates the difference between narrow and wise selfishness. Narrow selfishness leads to downfall, while wise selfishness, which is caring for others, leads to enlightenment. Yet we often cling to enlightenment itself, thinking, I must practice bodhicitta, the awakened heart and mind, to become a Buddha. This thought, as is put here, is mistaken. The true motivation is not for self-gain, but the wish to help others fully. This is why we always say, may I become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, not so that I can become enlightened, because it's so great. It's for the benefit of other sentient beings. Since we cannot yet guide beings through the entire path, we must first gain enlightenment ourselves in order to do so. This is the genuine reason to cultivate bodhicitta. Anything else motivated by self-concern is hollow and false. Somebody has their their mic on, it would be helpful to check and make sure that your mic is off if you're making some kind of noise. Yeah. All right, here's verse 8, the final verse. May they not be defiled by the concepts of the 8 mundane concerns, and aware that all things are illusory, may they, ungrasping, be freed from bondage. Again. 8. May they not be defiled by the concepts of the 8 mundane concerns, and aware that all things are illusory, may they, ungrasping, be freed from bondage. This verse is emphasizing wisdom. Spiritual practice should not be undermined by what are called the 8 worldly concerns, which are mentioned. The 8 mundane concerns, or the 8 worldly concerns. They're also known as the 8 worldly dharmas. This is a Buddhist concept that highlights the attachments and aversions that lead an ego, self-grasping person to suffering. So these 8 mundane concerns are extremely important, and they go hand in hand with these 8 verses of mind training. We need to know what these 8 mundane concerns are. And we will recognize them immediately because it is everything that the ego is concerned about. They are divided into 4 pairs of desires and fears that govern human behavior. So here's the first 2 of the 8. Comfort versus discomfort. Comfort is the pursuit of pleasure and comfort. Discomfort is the fear of pain and discomfort. So we always want to have pleasure. We always want comfort. We're always seeking after that. We're attracted to it. We're attached to it. And we have a great aversion to anything that's uncomfortable or painful. So even if we're sitting in a room with air conditioning and the air conditioning is like 2 degrees too high, we go, oh, it needs to be cool. It needs to be cooler. I need to be comfortable. Or we want to sit in a very, very, very comfortable chair. We don't want to sit in a hard chair. We're very concerned about this all the time. Or, we have to have just the right food to eat or the right thing to drink. We're all concerned with that, and we get bent out of shape when we don't get what we want. So this is the attachment to comfort and the aversion for discomfort. This is one of the 8 worldly concerns that lead to our suffering. Second one is good reputation versus bad reputation. This is a huge one. Good reputation is the desire for widespread respect and admiration. Every ego wants that. In whatever way and whatever arena that is important to them, they want that. They want that widespread respect and admiration. Every ego has aversion to this, the bad reputation, the fear of being held in low esteem and regarded poorly by others. Everybody does everything they can to hide that, to avoid that, to not let anything out that might ruin their reputation. So these 2 things are causes for suffering. These 2 things are what the ego has strong attachment to and strong aversion for. The third pair, 5 and 6, are praise versus blame. Praise is the craving for approval and positive feedback. And wow, don't we know that one? Craving approval. Give me good, give me positive feedback. I need this, right? That's ego. Blame is the fear of criticism and negative judgment. Nobody wants to be criticized. Nobody wants any negative judgment aimed at them. Even when we're little kids, it's like, it's not my fault, I didn't do it. No, you don't want any of the blame directed your way. You want to be praised. So these, again, are 2 very strong ego attachments and aversions that lead to suffering. And the last ones, which are 7 and 8, are gain versus loss. Gain is the pursuit of material wealth and possessions. And don't we see that all over the place? Loss is the fear of losing what we have acquired. And this drives many of us. So these are the 8 worldly concerns. Becoming elated by the positive or depressed by the negative binds us to self-centeredness. Becoming elated by the positive and depressed by the negative binds us to self-centeredness and the illusion of a solid me and a solid other. Now here we're actually getting now into touching on this very subtle teaching of the nature of existence, which is non-duality. The non-duality of self and other. And what the ego sees is a very solid self and very solid other, and doesn't see the very real and subtle connection between self and other. And this is what Buddhism is ultimately training the mind to have, that we have a realization of this, the non-duality of self and other. The way to avoid this is to understand that all experiences are like illusions. Oh dear, we're done.
Yeah, we're done.
Just finish your thought there.
Okay. The way to avoid this is by understanding that all experiences are like illusions. Things appear to have a fixed, independent existence, but in reality, they do not. We've talked a lot about this. They exist only in dependence on conditions and on the names or the labels that we give to those things. This is the meaning of emptiness. Things exist, but not in the independent, self-contained way they seem to. Although this is difficult to grasp, this insight helps us live with balance. By seeing that people, events, and even our own thoughts are not solid or inherently existent as they appear, we stop being controlled by them. Instead of labeling someone who hurts us as truly awful, we can recognize that our labels shape our experience. We can even reframe difficult people as teachers, giving us opportunities to develop patience, humility, and compassion. Everything we encounter is dependently co-arises, like an illusion. When we stop clinging to appearances as absolute, we find freedom from the dualistic views of praise and blame, gain and loss, and the other worldly concerns of attachment and aversion, enabling us to turn challenges that could lead to suffering into opportunities for growth. So we will end here, but I want everybody, based on what we've talked about, to just take some time during the week, based on this information, to sort of analyze for yourself, then what is world peace? What is world peace? Based on all of this information. And then next week, that's how we'll start. We'll start with what is world peace. Okay. Okay.
Why don't we do the
Okay, so very quickly, in all our lives, well, may we never be separated from perfect lamas, and so enjoy the magnificent Dharma, completing all the levels and stages of the path to enlightenment. May we quickly attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings who we are connected to. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Good discussion. You know.
Great class.
And I hope we can really
Tune in next week.
get into this mind journey.
What
What is peace? World peace.
Why don't we have?
And why do we not have
Thank you, Chris.
Oh, so welcome. You're so welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Great to
you.
see you.
Thank
Love you all, and we'll see you
Yeah,
next
right back
time.
to Julie.